Ivo Daalder is president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs and was previously the US permanent representative on the Council of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That was from 2009 to 2013. Ivo, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Before we get on to some of the substantive issues, it really did feel like normal services resumed, and NATO has been crying out for a leader to rally around for a few years now.
For sure. For the last 4 years, the United States, which normally leads in the alliance, it is not only the largest military power, it's just the largest voice in the room. And many of the allies have become used to, first of all, listening to the United States. And when they agree, which mostly they do, to then follow them. Donald Trump was the loudest voice in the room, but he was saying things that no one could agree with him, least of all the idea that NATO was somehow a favor that the United States would do for its allies, for which they needed to pay the United States. That is not what NATO is about, as Joe Biden said just in your clip. NATO is fundamentally in the U.S. national interest. It's something we joined because it was about our security as well as Europe's security. So that change, that fundamental predisposition that we saw in the last few hours in Brussels was very different than we saw 4 years ago with Donald Trump.
Yeah, and it clearly makes it much easier to coalesce around some of the big issues facing the NATO. And if we focus on China for a moment, can you just help me read between the lines here? Because Joe Biden said we're in a contest with autocratic governments around the world, and at the same time he said we're not looking for conflict, we're looking to resolve those actions which we think are inconsistent and inconsistent with international norms. So what is he actually trying to say to China there? Because it does feel pretty front foot, let's say.
Well, what he's saying is he's listening to Xi Jinping, China's president, who has said that the United States is a declining power. And he sees the world as increasingly having to choose between an autocratic rule and level of government, which is what China offers, as the way to solve the problems in the world, versus democratic countries trying to do so. And he thinks, rightly in my mind, that the democracies need to demonstrate to their own people, as well as to others around the world, but first and foremost to their own people, that they can still take care and provide for them and better than one could under an autocratic system. So it's about competing between two world visions, an autocratic vision and a democratic vision, in order to demonstrate who can do better. That it doesn't mean the same as confrontation. Confrontation is beating the other side rather than out-competing them in what you're trying to do. And I think this is important. Competition isn't confrontation, isn't conflict. And I think that's how Joe Biden was able to convince the allies that this is something they should sign up to.
OK, so competition and a certain level of challenge there, as opposed perhaps to confrontation with Russia.
Clear. Russia is described as a threat, whereas China is described as a challenge. A challenge you can manage and deal with, a threat you need to counter. And clearly Russia remains the most important security threat to the United States and to NATO within the transatlantic context. And now we have made that very clear, again, in the communique where Russia was mentioned over 60 times, almost never in a positive light, China only 10 times, to underscore that what NATO first and foremost is still about is the territorial integrity of its members, and its political independence, and that is threatened by the military capabilities and the kind of actions that the Russians have been demonstrating in the past few years.
And I'm sure that's exactly what the Eastern and Central European countries wanted to hear as well. Ivo, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate your analysis there. Ivo Daalder joining us.